Hello, thank you so much for joining us today to have listened to this presentation about understanding ear infections and gluea. I think it's relevant to most parents really because so many children will suffer from ear infections and possibly gluea. And we may not always pick up on this. There may not always be many signs of this. So it's likely that it will be relevant to you. I'm hoping that we'll be able to help as many people as possible by raising awareness of this for parents. If you watch it and you know of somebody who you think is going to be helpful for, then please do pass it on and share it as well. That would be great. As many people as we can reach as possible. My name's Dr. Alex Redfern. I'm an educational psychologist. I've been working in Staffordshire for about 10 years.
My name's Ruth Hardy. I'm a trainee educational psychologist in the third year of my training here at Staffordshire.
So Ruth and I are going to be joined today by our colleague Michelle Lane, who's an educational audiologist and teacher of the deaf. And she's going to be joining us via video. So we'll be playing videos from Michelle so she can give us a little bit of the technical information about hearing loss, which is really helpful and really important. And then what Ruth and I are going to do is come in a little bit more with the education side and how it can impact children from in terms of education, but also socially and all of the things that we see as educational psychologists in schools. So.
Hello, my name's Michelle Lane. I'm a teacher of the deaf and educational audiologist for the Specialist Teaching Support Service.
There's Michelle. So the title of the presentation is Understanding Ear Infections and Gluea, with a little subtitle that I've put in, which is how taking early action can support your child's learning, confidence, and well-being, because early hearing loss can affect all of those things. So it can affect your child's learning, so their ability to pick up reading and to pick up phonics, which is hugely important because those first years, 0 to 5, are absolutely critical in speech development and reading development. So it's a very, very important time. Their confidence, because not being able to hear well, even for periods of time, can affect how children understand socializing with others, and then the patterns that they develop, the confidence that they have in social interaction. So all of those things from a really early stage are very important. And also their well-being. Children who find it difficult to speak, find it difficult to interact with other children, and find it difficult to read, all find that their self-esteem is affected in school, and they may just not be as happy, or they might find ways to get around these things, but it's really important that we are aware of this and the impact of this, because it's something that can affect so many children of different degrees, and so the point of this presentation really is to raise awareness amongst parents so that you feel really well prepared if you notice this, to get on top of it and to make a real difference to your child's long-term well-being and outcomes. So what are the aims of the presentation? So we're going to have a little look at temporary hearing loss. What is it? What is gluea? What are the signs of gluea? How will I notice it? What can I do if my child has gluea, and what kind of treatment can we get for gluea? Because there are various different options, and it's important that we take this seriously and that we consider all of the options, even if it seems like a big deal or it might seem like we're overreacting a bit. It's very, very important. What is the impact of gluea? So if my child does have periods of hearing loss, what are the possible impacts going to be? And what's the link between early hearing loss, otitis media, so middle hearing loss, and difficulties with learning? And what helps? Early action is so important, and that's early action from you. It's also early action from schools. It's you getting schools involved. It's you getting other services involved. What can we do to get the best possible outcomes for your child? And then the last part of the presentation is the links that will be helpful to you moving forward, and where can you go if you're not sure where to go next, if you've got some concerns.
So what causes gluea? Within the structure of the ear, you've got a eustachian tube, which goes into the middle ear. And the job of this eustachian tube is to let air in and out of that middle ear to equalise the pressure in the middle. If this eustachian tube is not doing its job, what happens is the walls of the middle ear start secreting juices into the middle ear, and these juices get thicker and stickier, and this is what we refer to as glue ear. And the glue ear remains in that middle ear. Sometimes they may have more glue, other months they have may less, depending on other things such as external factors, like maybe they've got a cold, maybe they're congested. And what happens with a cold is the eustachian tube is compressed, so therefore it doesn't work as well. Or possibly if a child's got enlarged adenoids or tonsils, this also sort of squashes the eustachian tube. Other children's eustachian tube may be at a more horizontal position, and as they mature and grow, it may get back into position of a more vertical, and this will help with the pressure. Some children with certain conditions, due to the structure of their facial features, may mean that their eustachian tube will be in this position more long term. So sometimes glue ear can be seen as a long-term condition for some children, but most children it is a temporary condition, with the hope that by the age of about 10 years old, they will grow out of it because this eustachian tube will fall into place.
So as Michelle's just said, that's one of the reasons why glue is so common in younger children, so under the age of 10, because the eustachian tube changes direction and then becomes more effective.
So when we think about hearing, we need to be thinking about the frequencies of sounds. So that means the low pitch sounds and the high pitch sounds, as well as the soft sounds and the loud sounds. And when you think about hearing, you often think that a child either can hear or they can't hear, but actually the hearing is across a spectrum of speech sounds. And we can hear a range of speech sounds, and they fall into this speech banana, which is shown on the screen there by the yellow shape. And that shows the frequencies of sounds. So as we hear people speak, our ears are picking up on all the different frequencies. And within our ear, they're picking up on these sounds, and our brain is interpreting and understanding these sounds as words. With glue ear, the amplification of the sound is reduced, and so the child can't hear as well. The hearing loss can be mild, so just below normal, so the child can hear some speech sounds from the bottom of the speech banana, but not the sounds at the top. So they're the ones that are softer, so sh, ch, and t. With moderate hearing loss, most of the speech sounds in the banana can't be heard clearly. So they can hear some sounds when someone's talking, but that sound's going to be very muffled. And that's because the sounds cannot get through the ear to be amplified as much. And again, it's much worse with a severe hearing loss. With glue ear, it usually ranges from mild to moderate, and it's occasionally severe. But it's important to remember that with glue ear, it can fluctuate. So for some days, it might be the hearing loss might be lower, and for other days, it might be higher. And that's to be expected. And because of these difficulties, it can affect a child's speech and language development.
Yeah. So this is a nice little video just to demonstrate what Ruth was just talking about, and to give you an impression, because I think sometimes it's hard to imagine, isn't it? But what it's like, even with very mild, to not be able to quite pick up on the sounds, and that more moderate to hear that muffled speech. So to imagine what it would be like for a child.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Aha! You're on my apartment building on Granite Avenue. You owe me $300. Get it up?
Fred, take it easy. It's only a game.
Wilma, I'm just like them big tycoons. I play to win. Now, Barney, pay up or get out of the game.
Busted.
That's 1 down and 2 to go. Betty, it's your turn.
I don't have any more money either. You got it all.
Then I'll take a mortgage on your open home. Well, come on, take the dice, will you? Don't just sit there like a dummy.
I will not have you talking that way to our dad. Come on, Barney. I think we'd better go home.
So you can see from that, I think, how difficult it can be for children who are having that muffled hearing, how difficult it would be, particularly in a noisy classroom or a busy nursery, to be able to concentrate, to be able to focus, to be able to interact with other children. So all of those things, it would also be really frustrating, and sometimes we do see some frustrated responses. So I think that's quite useful to give us an idea of what it might be like.
If you're concerned about your child's hearing, you need to speak with your GP or health visitor and ask them for a referral to audiology. Audiology will then carry out a bank of assessments, one of which is a tympanometry, where they put a probe in the ear and measure the pressure behind the eardrum. And this will show whether there is a presence of glue ear. They'll also be able to look in the ear and have a look at the eardrum to see if they can see a difference. And also some assessments where your child might have to listen for the quietest sound and look at a toy in a box, or they might have to put a man in a boat. It all depends on the age of your child. Following the assessment, they'll probably then ask you to come back.
So Michelle, that video just cut short for some reason, but I think Michelle was just going to say that then they will ask you to come back for a review, and then it will be monitored, and then you would get a treatment plan. And Michelle's going to tell you now about some of the possible treatments. And these, these seem quite serious because it's a small operation for grommets. Obviously, hearing aids might seem like a big deal, but for your child to be able to hear clearly during this critical period between up until the age of 5, when it's really important for speech development and really important for the development of understanding sounds, which are then going to affect their reading. To be able to have this kind of temporary input is very, very important. And it's not just extreme cases. We know that at any one time, 1 in 5 children in preschool are likely to have a glue ear infection, and that something like 8 out of 10 children will have glue ear before the age of 10. So it is really, really common, and it is really important that if we find that there are periods where we're worried about our child not being able to hear, they're getting frequent infections, that we do kind of go down this route and seek additional help to help our child to hear.
Alex will talk to you shortly.
I'm just going to go back to this one.
Different types of treatment options. Over the years, these have changed. So what I say now might not be true in a few months or a few years. But at the moment, there are 3 main types of treatment options. One is a referral to ENT. They'll explore the possibility of the insertion of grommets. Grommets are small little tubes that are inserted into the eardrum. And as part of the operation, they'll extract all the glue, insert the tube, which will help with the pressure and hopefully resolve the glue ear. Sometimes this works, other times the glue ear will come back, but the ENT consultant will be able to tell you all the pros and cons of grommets. There are also information links at the bottom of the training that you can also explore. The second option is a bone conduction aid. This can be on a soft band, a hard band, a band around the back. All different manufacturers are slightly different, but do the same job in principle. There's a tiny aid with microphones. This picks up the speech sounds, vibrates, transmits through the bone, bypasses the glue, goes straight to the cochlea, will identify the speech sounds, up the nerve to the brain, and then the brain can do the listening. Again, there are pros and cons of these. And the third one is a hearing aid. A hearing aid goes behind the ear, and this amplifies the sound in hope that it will push through the glue in order to get to the cochlea. Alex will talk to you shortly in more depth about the signs of glue ear and the impact of glue ear. But from my involvement with children with glue ear, I seem to come across 2 different types of children. I either come across the children that are quite shy, quite withdrawn, sort of watching from the side, observing everybody, not really joining in, just on the outside, in their own little world, taking it all in their stride. Or then I see the other child that is really excited, on the go, always busy, talking quite loudly, trying to make people laugh. And these children sort of like controlling their friends. And I often think this could be because if they do that, they haven't got to listen. They can just control the situation and talk at people rather than listening to them. So they're the 2 sorts of children that I come across. But also those children that teachers often refer to as, oh, they're daydreaming, or they're not concentrating, or maybe difficulties joining in with group work and friends. And often these children have got either glue ear or a history of glue ear. Because don't forget, we don't know at what point children develop glue ear. They might have developed it at a really young age and only identified at maybe the age of 3 or 4 when they start school and teachers start noticing that they're having some difficulties. So it's also always worth bearing in mind when thinking about glue ear is it could have started at any point. And then Alex will talk to you now about the impact that glue ear can have on children's learning. Thank you.
Yes, I think Michelle's summarised that quite nicely there. So if you hear from school, the school might say to you, about a lack of concentration, about not listening, not following instructions, not responding to their name. All of these things are things for you to say, okay, well, might that be related to hearing? So in terms of learning, we're going to look out for the child who confuses sounds, so confuses vowels and consonants, doesn't like phonics, struggles with phonics, finds it really difficult, doesn't want to sit for phonics because it's very, very hard for them, finds it hard to separate sounds, so to do that clapping rhythm for songs or anything like that, if that's difficult, it might be because of separating sounds and pausing. Difficulty with rhyme is another. So rhyme is one of the early on the phonological development, so that our understanding of sound, understanding rhyme is very early on in that. And so if your child's not picking up rhyme or not recognising rhyme, then that can be another indicator. Poor concentration, so not being able to concentrate, some of the things that Michelle mentioned, being easily distractible, finding it hard to understand sequencing and ordering of things, so things like before, after, days of the week, times tables, months. Not being able to follow instructions, looking like they've got difficulties in short-term memory because they can't hold much information. Might be because they're not hearing properly, or because they've been periods where they haven't been hearing properly, so they've got used to that and they've developed those strategies. Missing sounds, so it might be missing one sound, it might be missing the first part of a word, so I've put there tending instead of pretending, so listening out carefully for those kind of things. Speaking unclearly, particularly at certain times, if they're uncertain, if they're nervous, if it's noisy. Struggling, mixing up sounds, so p, b, t, d, k, g, for example, really common, and also can sound really, really cute when children are little, but just being aware of that and thinking about the reasons for that. And if it's ongoing and it's persistent, then is there a hearing need, or has there been a hearing need that we need to get investigated, and definitely a referral to speech and language. If you find that your child really loves watching TV but isn't following the story, so they like the visual side of it but they're not following the story, isn't coming up and saying things, isn't offering verbal information, isn't really using verbal information in play, isn't approaching children verbally, so might be approaching children through movement, or, as Michelle said, trying to control situations but not actually using language, because they're avoiding that because they've adapted to avoid that. Maybe a little bit of confusion with grammar, so missing words out, so where's book instead of book, for example. So all of these things are things to look out for. And hearing loss affects spoken language, so really, if your child's having difficulties with spoken language and they're not pronouncing words properly and it's hard to understand them, and you think that might be linked to hearing, then it's time to take some action and to start to think about what we can do with schools and on our own, which is what we'll talk about in a minute. Mild to moderate hearing loss, particularly temporary hearing loss and glue ear and the infections that we get with cold, is very specific to phonology, so this understanding the small units of sound, and that's why it places children at risk of speech difficulties and reading difficulties, which may affect them throughout school and may affect what they decide to do with the rest of their lives, may affect them in the long term. Ear infections and glue ear often lead to difficulties with phonological awareness, so difficulties understanding sounds and then obviously accessing those phonics programs. So most schools, you might know this already, use phonics programs where they teach letter sounds and they start with certain sounds and they work their way through, and they're using very structured programs. And I'll have schools saying to me, they can't pick up phonics. The phonics teaching, I might as well not be doing it because the child's not responding to the phonics program, and that we keep going back and over it again and they're not picking up on that, and that might have been because of this early hearing difficulty. Hearing loss caused by glue ear can mean that speech is affected, so there might be shouting, there might be whispering, noisy rooms are really, really difficult, and children adapt to this in ways that are not always good. So they adapt to it by being very quiet, or they adapt to it by being very noisy. And it might be that there's some confusion over your child might be even misdiagnosed, because we might find that schools suspect that the child maybe needed an autism assessment, for example, because they're not engaging in social interaction, but that might be linked to hearing. Or, for example, an ADHD assessment because the child is running around all of the time and isn't able to concentrate and focus. But again, it could be related to hearing. So we need to be careful about misdiagnosis as well. And awareness of this is really important for that reason. Children who can't understand rules or follow instructions, they get picked up for behavioural reasons and get into trouble a little bit, and you might have that mentioned to you. So all of these things are something to keep an eye out for. Specific sounds, so picking up specific sounds and then not being able to use these when learning to read, so difficulties with early reading and early phonics. So as part of my research into this, because it's been a real special area of interest for me because of the things that I've noticed through my casework, so noticing that when parents have said to me that their child, or schools have said to me the child's not able to read, then when I've gone back and I've seen there's been a history of glue ear, which was the thing that really got me first interested in this. And that led me to the research of Dr. Lindsay Peer, who's written a book called Glue Ear. And I've been in touch with her, but she one of her statistics is that out of 1,000 people with a dyslexia diagnosis, 703 of them had a history of glue ear infection. So we do know that there's a link, and I don't think that is very much common knowledge, and I definitely think it's something that we could be more aware of as parents and schools, and that's why this awareness raising is really important. The child might seem to be distracted or disorganized, and might just tune out, just not engaging in learning, just decided actually this is too difficult and opt out. So in thinking about what we can do as a parent, it's really important also to think about what you can do to get schools to help. So mention it to the special educational needs coordinator. If you've got any concern about hearing, if your child's been having a lot of infections, any of these things, you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, that sounds like my child, or that's something that worries me, then mention it to the special educational needs coordinator. They can get some help. They can refer to Family Action. They can refer to speech and language. So they can get help from other professionals. Family Action can then help families to approach the doctor. You could take this presentation to the doctor if you wanted to give you ideas about what to say and let them know why you're concerned. Sometimes you might need to keep going with this because, you know, it's difficult to get GP appointments at the moment, and it can sometimes be difficult to be heard. And the policy for a long time now has been watch and wait. So there used to be hearing screening in primary schools, but now because screening at birth for hearing impairment is so good, there isn't as much screening later on, which has affected how easily these hearing difficulties are picked up. And also this policy of watch and wait might mean that your child isn't getting the grommets, isn't getting the audiology input at the time when they really, really need it, which is before the age of 5. So we can take a little bit of responsibility for that and maybe push a little bit with that. And when we know more, then we can be more confident to do that. Consider referral to speech and language because they're a really important part of this. Staffordshire have a website which schools will know about, which is the Graduated Response, and they've got deaf awareness strategies. Now, these are really important for schools because these are the things that can help your child. You know, we may not have a deaf child, but we may have a child who's constantly having infections and has phases where they can't hear very well. And these deaf awareness strategies could be the difference between them being able to be engaged in the classroom and not being able to be engaged. And then finally, educational psychology, that's us. So we've got an app called Educate EPAT, which is Educational Psychology Assessment Through Teaching, which monitors the development of reading and spelling, and also it's going to do maths as well. And we've incorporated some things into that now, which are for children who aren't picking up those early sounds. So that's a really good intervention. And there are other things that we can recommend if we feel that your child has missed and is struggling with reading for this very specific reason. Then school might want to get educational psychology involved as well. So do feel free to ask them about that as well. As a parent, what can you do to help? So you can very specifically spend time teaching your child to listen. So it's something that we take for granted, isn't it? Particularly when we're busy as parents. But get their attention before you're speaking. Physically turn their face towards you. Make sure they're looking at you. Make sure they can see your mouth. So don't exaggerate your mouth movements. Don't do this because that would be unnatural, and the child would just be alarmed by it maybe, or think it's strange. But do speak clearly and do speak loudly and do enunciate so that it's very easy for the child to hear you. Make sure it's quiet. Think about the background noise, and remind them to stop, to listen, and then to speak. They're good skills anyway for a child, but sometimes it can be really, really helpful for those children who are struggling to hear.
So thinking about strategies for in the home, your child may be fitted with a bone conduction aid or a hearing aid, and if so, it's really important that they wear these as much as possible, focusing on key times when you may be communicating together, talking and playing. Set a routine where they wake up like they would brush their teeth, brush their hair, they put their equipment on, making sure it's working, it's clean, it's in the right position, not too loose, not too baggy, not too tight, making sure there's a working battery, making sure that school or nursery have spare batteries just in case, and the battery tool for the tamper-proof should be on for any under 5s. So it's considering the equipment and making sure it's working effectively for them. The more they wear that equipment, the more clear signal they're going to be hearing, and that will help with their learning and communication. Then also thinking about background noise. Children with glue ear will find it more difficult to hear when there's high levels of noise, because they'll be working out what's the speech, what's the noise. So at times when you're having those conversations or stories or singing with your children, turn off as much of the background noise as you can, turn the TV off, turn music off, get rid of all the sources of background noise, close the doors, close the windows, just so that they can focus on what you're saying. And finally, thinking about your lip patterns, making sure they can see your lips, not covering your lips when talking to them, nice clear expressions, nice natural rhythm of speech, and getting close to them about 1 to 2 meters down at their level so that they can get the best signal possible.
Really helpful. And as a parent, just doing everything you can in the little interactions you have with your child, and in the games that you play together, just really simple games which focus on sound awareness. So picking up sounds. So when you're going for a walk, what sounds can you hear? Can you hear the birds singing? Can you hear sounds at different levels, frequencies? So can you hear a lorry? So picking out sounds like that. Thinking about just talking about sounds with your child. Are these noisy sounds or are they quiet sounds? And making noisy sounds yourself and making quiet sounds yourself. Playing with musical instruments or shakers or anything that you've got around the house. So can the child match the sound that you're making? So if you're playing one instrument, can they find an instrument that makes the same sound? Focusing on long and short sounds, so games which encourage your child to focus on sounds and give attention to sounds. So if you've got a tambourine or a shaker, for example, you shake it for a long time and the child reaches up high, and you shake it for a short time and the child crouches down low. So just real nice interactive games that children like, but are actually encouraging them to focus on sounds and are also allowing you to see if there's any difficulty with sound. What else can you do? So particularly for reading, these things are really important. So breaking down the sounds in words, so separating sounds and then blending sounds. So we call it segmenting and blending. So tapping, clapping, tapping on your arm to separate these sounds out, making a sound for each or a clap for each noise sound is really, really helpful. Having a block for each sound is very helpful. Make a note of any sounds that your child's struggling with. So at the end of the presentation, there's a screen which has got pictures that you can go through to see whether your child's struggling with any particular sounds, particularly if you notice that they mix certain sounds or there seems to be some sounds that they can't say consistently. There's loads of good phonics apps. So we want these phonics interventions for the child who might have some difficulties with phonological awareness or has had some difficulty picking up on early sounds maybe. They need to be multisensory. That means that we can we can hear them, we can see them, with this movement with them, basically. So the Jolly Phonics is a really good example, because you have, for example, the character, you can have the videos, you can have this of the snake, which then you move up the arm, so there's movement with it as well. We can, if we're actually moving on to letters, then you can trace the letter on their arm or trace the letter in sand. I focus on rhyming books. So rhyming books are really great, because rhyming is one of the key skills at the early areas of phonological awareness development, and children might struggle with rhyme. And so getting them engaged in the Julia Donaldson books, for example, like the Gruffalo, that kind of thing, they're really helpful. Playing I Spy is a really good old-fashioned game. Children still seem to really like it, so it's a good one to pick out sounds, particularly if there's sounds that you know are a problem. Using phonics apps together, and children often love these, don't they, because they're quite interactive. They can move them around on the iPad, and they're often amazing on the iPad. Musical instruments we've already talked about, and anything that's in the references section. Using pictures alongside words is also really important as well. Is there anything we've missed there that you can think of, Ruth?
Just the one thing that came to mind was thinking about the Julia Donaldson books and those rhymes. There's also the animations on, I want to say it's on iPlayer, definitely of the Gruffalo, maybe of Stickman as well. So that kind of like multi-sensory approach to the rhyme, being able to see the visual alongside it might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, really helpful. So like it's a cartoon version of the book. So
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
so like
animation.
Yeah, so the animation of the book, yeah, so you can see the characters at the same time as listening to the rhyme. Yeah, that's a brilliant idea as well. So anything like that is perfect. Anything that focuses in rhyme, and obviously nursery rhymes and songs and dancing and all of that kind of thing are great. Again, specifically for reading, this is a little bit more advanced, but thinking about isolating sounds. So if we took the away from Matt, what sound would you be left with? That's actually quite tricky. What words begin with the same sound? So we've got there push and pull, and then you could add in another word as well and ask your child to pick out the ones that begin with the same sounds. A little bit of blending, so cat, so putting sounds together. Thinking about the first sounds, thinking about what sound would be left if you took away one sound. Can you hear a particular sound in a word? So any of these games with words that isolate sounds. So we don't necessarily need to use letters. It can all be done verbally, but just encouraging your child to be able to blend sounds together and to be able to separate sounds. And they're really, really important reading skills, and they're skills which we will definitely need to spend more time on and more focus on if your child has had early hearing difficulties, and which could make a huge difference to them in school. So to get more information specifically about Gluea, if you're concerned at all, or if you're interested, all of these websites are excellent, and they've also got tips on things that can help and where you can go. So any of those are great. To get more helpful links on things that you can do as a parent, so things that you can do at home. So there's Jolly Phonics there, there's the screening tool that I talked about before. This QR code here is a link to this one, which is Microsoft Word Generalizing Speech Sounds. So it's how to make use of speech sounds for your child, just using simple games and things. Any of these will be really helpful, because really it's just so important that we take action. If there are periods, I mean, we do, we tend to accept that hearing infections and colds, they're just part of child life. But if we feel that children aren't hearing properly, I hope that knowing now that you've listened to this presentation, and you'll be a little bit more aware of the impact that can have on your child in lots of different ways, and in how well they do in school, and in how happy they feel in school, and in the development of friendships, and in being able to actually participate in the curriculum, so what's being learned in school, because being an independent reader is such an important part of that, and their confidence in school. So all of these things are things that could be affected potentially by this early hearing loss. So anything that you can do as a parent to help that will just make a massive difference. And even if this just makes a difference to one child, or if somebody shares it with somebody else and it makes a difference to them, then that will be great, because there is something that we can do, and it starts with awareness. Is there anything I've missed, Ruth, that you wanted to add at the end of that?
I don't think so. I think you covered it all really nicely.
So thank you so much from both of us from all three of us, Michelle as well, for taking the time to listen to this presentation. And I hope you know where to go from this. If you want more information, and certainly contact your school, and they can always get in touch with the educational psychologist or the hearing impairment service as well. Thank you.
Thank you.